Now, when I was in grade 8, my school held a public speaking contest where every student was required to pick a topic and then speak about it in front of their class, with the winner of each class then going head to head against each other at a school assembly about a week later. And what I spoke on was of a very famous British fighter plane of the Second World War, the unsung hero of the Battle of Britain, the Hawker Hurricane. Now, what you need to understand about me back then was that I was a very shy and insecure kid. And so imagine my surprise when I actually won in front of my class. And so I was chosen by my class to represent them the following week in front of the entire school. Unfortunately, my second performance wasn't all that great. I remember getting up at the podium, looking out at everyone, and my mind simply went blank. I stuttered, I stammered over my words. My posture was horrible. I remember leaning sort of over the podium. And I also remember I had a Kleenex in my hand, a tissue that I rubbed to shreds because I was just so nervous. So all this is to say that I didn't win. And as I reflect back upon that time, it clearly was one of the most humiliating experiences of my entire life. So much so that I distinctly remember vowing that never again would I ever do any public speaking. More about that later on in the video. Hi everyone, I'm Mark Leeming, helping you think biblically in a brief amount of time with a new video each and every Thursday, so please do consider subscribing and don't forget to hit that notification bell. Now, Matthew's Gospel, chapters 5, 6, and 7, contain the most famous sermon ever preached, Christ's Sermon on the Mount, that he gave on a mountain slope somewhere around the Sea of Galilee. And he began that sermon with what's known as the Beatitudes. Now, for us as a culture that's been so heavily influenced by Christianity, so heavily influenced by the teachings of Jesus, when we read the Beatitudes, we may not find them really all that remarkable, and yet to the original audience, they were. Many Jews, they were expecting a Messiah who would lead a military uprising against the Romans. And for the Romans, everything about the Beatitudes, everything about Jesus' teaching went against the archetype of a heroic figure that they so esteemed. And so I don't think it's really all that surprising then that Jesus began the Beatitudes with, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God." Meaning that only those who recognize their own inability, that they don't have the strength to fulfill the Beatitudes, to fulfill the Sermon on the Mount, that they don't have it within them. They don't have the strength, they don't have the power. Only those people would really understand what the kingdom of heaven is all about. Only they would understand who Jesus was about. And it was that acknowledgement of inadequacy, that acknowledgement of weakness that so confused the mind of people back then. What Jesus was saying turned everything upside down. And it was that inverted value system of Jesus that caused him to do some rather strange things, at least in the eyes of his contemporaries. Unlike most rabbis when they were starting out, when they sought new disciples, they sought followers, many would go to the top seminaries of their day, so to speak, to seek out the best and brightest students, the most refined, the most articulate, but not Jesus. Jesus instead went down to the shorelines, to the fishermen. He went to the construction sites, the factories of his day to seek out disciples. Men who obviously were not very refined, not very articulate, and would be the last people you would think that a rabbi would seek out. And yet those were exactly the kind of men that Jesus wanted. Now, I always find that when talking about a topic such as this, that I need to clarify that I'm not talking about anti-intellectualism here. We have to remember that when just a few years later, when Christ rose from the dead, that he chose the Apostle Paul to become a major figurehead in the early church. Paul, who was a top scholar in ancient Israel, a very learned man who, if he were alive today, would have all kinds of letters behind his name. So Jesus definitely was not anti-intellectual. The church isn't against higher learning. It's just that we need to realize that God's value system is very different from ours, that it's not about our abilities, our talents, our strengths. We need to learn what it means to become poor in spirit. We need to let go of our egos that are so often intertwined, right, with our talents, our abilities, and our strengths. Now, to circle back to my story of 8th grade, my public speaking fiasco, my vow to never speak in public again. Well, obviously God had different plans. Who would have thought that I would end up becoming a YouTube preacher? That in my 50s, I would end up be preaching about the kingdom of heaven to people literally all across the globe. Matthew 5:3, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It's not about our abilities, our strengths, our giftings. Rather, it's about us stepping aside and allowing God to use those strengths, those abilities, those giftings for His glory. To quote the Apostle Paul, when I am weak, then I am strong. Please do take the time to watch one of those videos over there. Share this video with your friends and family. And remember, stay weak.